Folks, welcome to one of my favourite. I've been anticipating this for some time, and my partner Naomi has been really looking forward to this as an AFL tragic. And I'm talking with absolutely one of the icons of the sport. I've seen grown men in tears, literally, talking about the talent, the heart, the will that this man has embodied. And what I love that we're going to be bringing him to you at the Total Success road trip coming up. And we're going to pick the brain, get a little bit of the insights into the man, the myth, the icon, the legend. There you go, there's a setup for you, mate. Chris Judd. Thanks, mate, for hanging out.
Good to see you, Glenn. It's an incredible introduction.
Thanks, man. Naomi had me rehearse that. But before we get on to kind of some of your success strategies, man, because your leadership and everything in your career is iconic. But I've got a mate of mine who's a tragic Eagles fan, right? A tragic lifer. His name's Mal from WA.
Not
right?
Mal Emery.
Is he that legendary?
He's that big over there. He's very, very influential down at the club.
He's a good man. So, Mal, before we sort of talk about some of the principles that you're going to be getting into with our guys down here in Melbourne at the event, Mal wanted me to ask you about kind of the exit, because he did say that the word he used was a bit of an enigma, in that you were a quiet man, you left your talking to be done on the field through talent, through execution, through your gameplay. So he was asking about how the thinking was around, I suppose, the exit at the top of your game from the Eagles to go to Carlton.
I guess essentially the reason for my exit was unrelated to football. So I think for those reasons it was hard for some people to understand. It was really related to how I wanted to set up my family life away from the game. So it was hard for some people to process that. But Melbourne was always my home. I left in my mid-20s, and it just felt at that time it was going to give me long enough to play at a second club, but still essentially set up a life post-football with my family in the state where I was going to live longer term. So it was an incredibly hard decision at the time, because I loved the West Coast Footy Club, you know, really strong relationships with a lot of players there, and had some wonderful experiences and success with those guys. So very, very challenging decision, but you know, 2 years out of footy now, to have been able to establish a life in Melbourne, have 4 kids, you know, it's certainly been the right move for me. Yeah,
so the plan was a winner, even though maybe a few people weren't as happy with it when they lost their icon a little bit. But I did ask Mal, I said, how did the club feel about it? You know, they said, he'll always be a legend here, don't you worry about that. So obviously
there's mixed feelings about that.
Oh, is there? Okay.
I'm glad that's how
he's
Mal
on the
feels.
good side.
That's right. That's right.
Nice. Well, those days when you were the leader of that club, I want to ask you about leadership, because there's famous stories that Naomi's told me, that Mal's told me, about how it's almost like your will to win sometimes got you over the line. You know, when the body's tired, when maybe the injuries, maybe towards, you know, you've been hurt and things like that, and just pure will got you over the line. But that's you. How does that work when it's a team that needs to be willed over the line with you at the head of that team?
Yeah, I think a lot of the things or lessons I took away from West Coast looking back were things that we were doing subconsciously, things around really having a clear understanding of why we're so focused on attaining success. One of the powerful things when you play at a football club is having exposure to the past players who've played in premiership teams. And you remember getting exposure to those players. Some of them were working at the club at the time. One of them was coaching us at the time. And just that constant reinforcement of the strength in relationships that the success throughout their time had given them. And that was a really strong driving force behind that group. Just not just the will to work hard on game day. What was far more important than that was the will to really be self-driven on the training track, particularly over the summer months. And it was really a group that would train just as hard if none of the coaches were out there watching what they were doing than they would if all the coaches were there. The motivation to train wasn't to impress other people, it was because there was a genuine appetite amongst the playing group to improve so that they could in turn contribute to the success that the footy club was after.
Wow, I wish I knew that quote now that Ali said. Remember there was a quote of Ali saying that it didn't get one under the lights, it got one at 4 a.m. out on the track.
Yeah, and I think in sport and there's a parallel in business. It's really what you're doing when nobody's watching that is what counts, and I guess that's what Ali was trying to capture there.
Definitely, mate. Yeah. Hey, and on that leadership with that winning team that you had, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, I suppose, because with our guys, there's certainly correlations between high performance in sport and the mental anguish, especially for our real estate crew that are going to be coming to our event. That people think that real estate is kind of just showing houses, saying, "Oh, there's a nice place here, and what do you want to pay for it," or whatever. But the pressure of that entrepreneurship in all industries, and especially real estate, it can be hard. And sometimes there might be challenges in, even if you overcome that, dealing with success. You're obviously someone who dealt with success magnificently. You set it up, you had a plan, you moved because it was part of the plan, and you did it well and you managed it well. And then there might have been a colleague that, you know, in your team, you know, young Ben Cousins, and again, as a really a non-AFL guy, I'm a latecomer, I only saw what the media wanted me to see, you know, and it seems that kind of Ben maybe didn't deal with success as well as might have everyone around him who cared about him might have liked. What's your take on kind of being successful, dealing with success, and maybe, you know, when the challenges are along the way, are there trappings that people can fall for?
Yeah, there's a bit in that. I think when I reflect on Ben, you know, Ben's great strength was his obsessiveness. As a footballer, it was his obsession with training and how hard he wanted to work and how driven he was. And, you know, I suspect in the end it was that mental chatter in his head that he just wasn't able to shut out any other way. Which in turn has caused him to go through this almighty struggle that he's still battling with today. So it's just so strange that someone with such a strong strength has also been his greatest curse to date. So I mean, we sit here and certainly wish him all the best and hope he's able to come out the other side of that. But in terms of dealing with success, I think you know, I think it's really dangerous to associate success with who you are as a person. I think it's important to separate the two. How can I frame that? I might need a little bit of time to collate my thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, you're right. And the reason for the question is our guys have the opportunity when they're at the top of their game, making millions of dollars per year individually in their income. And with that, you know, with a 35-year-old who can put $1 million in revenue personally in his bank account, there's some challenges around that sort of success at, you know, at that age.
I think I could probably articulate it. I think there's a difference between being successful at what you do and being successful as a person. So success for me as a person is being able to live a life aligned to the things that you value. And what those things you value are won't be the same for everybody. If there'll be a Catholic who might value these things, and there'll be, you know, Farmer Joe that might value polar opposite things. As long as they're living a life aligned to the things that they value, that's what success as a person looks like to me. Then there's success in your job. So when you're a footballer, success in your job looks like winning premierships and contributing to those premierships. In business, more often than not, it's creating wealth for yourself and the business that you're working in, and there'll be other drivers for businesses along the way. But I think it's important not to confuse the two, because there's plenty of people who've had a huge amount of success as a footballer that still aren't able to live a life aligned to the things that they value day in and day out. And vice versa. So I think that's an important thing to be aware of, because a lot of the successful, as you're determining in business, is essentially transient. You know,
it's true.
People aren't going to be in business forever. Someday they retire. Someday there's a new shinier toy that disrupts their business. But if they're measuring success by how they live their life, I think that's more of a longer term play.
Man, I needed to find this. I need to find this guy early, mate. That's deep, man. It's true, bud. Because we see, I mean, even just last couple of weeks, the fellow from Lincoln Park, or you know, like people seemingly at the height of success in their respective fields, but they're miserable to the point where it ain't even worth being here. Wow.
And I think as a footy player, that's what we become hyper aware of, because you go through those retirement things, which most people go through in their late 60s or 70s. Really when you're still a young man. So I mean, I've gone through a lot of those emotions of being valued by society for doing something really heavily, and then have that taken away in my early 30s, where most successful businessmen or women, that's something they deal with sort of in their late 60s or 70s.
Yeah,
so,
it's an interesting analogy.
It's been an interesting insight from my perspective on how attached you should get to, you know, those types of success, which are still really important in and of their own right. But how attached you get to them can be dangerous.
Yeah, it's exactly kind of the way Mal kind of put it to me about yourself, that you didn't buy, it's almost like, and God love him, I love Warwick Capper, he came to my staff Christmas party as our special guest, but it's almost like Warwick had his brand built around that extracurricular personality, but Mal was saying about yourself that you didn't kind of buy into that hype, I suppose, that you had your family life, and the word he used was enigma, that you kind of left it all on the field and stuff. But actually, I've heard you talk about the brand, you know, I think there was an interview I saw with you.
I would have been taking the piss.
Was it Tom Gleeson? Oh, that'll affect the brand. That was a funny interview, mate.
Yeah.
But what have you done with the Chris Judd brand post? Is that kind of where you're focusing on and using the Chris Judd brand to I suppose, run a business nowadays?
Oh, yes and no. So I've got a small apparel business that sells sporting goods, or sports apparel, called Jagged, which I, along with some other shareholders, have had for about 5 years now. So that's sort of been kicked along by my sporting background, and the other people have some background in sports too. And then I'm doing some media work, which plays on that brand side of things. But most of my days spent looking at microcap listed equities. So I really enjoy that, and meet management and explore that. And essentially, that's really unrelated to Chris Judd, the football. That's essentially a new frontier and using my brain in a different way.
Wow, the cerebral assassin, mate.
Well,
I love
that's
it.
right.
Nice. Well, you always were known as a thinking man's. Like one of the guys was saying that, you know, when your body was sort of slowed down a little bit, but you still had the brain, the heart, the will, and you use those other assets when the speed of a 24-year-old wasn't quite as zippy, you know. So interesting to see, mate.
Yeah, you just have to adapt. Footy,
Nice.
but the legs went pretty early, so you had to find some new tricks.
Yeah, cool, bud. So one thing that, it's certainly a really personal question for me that I've heard you talk about smelling the roses along the way. You know, many of my crew would be looking at me saying he's having a dream run. And admittedly, look, I ain't gonna argue with them. You know, when I've got my childhood heroes in business with me, friends of mine socialising with me, it's crazy, right? I still pinch myself. But I haven't looked back at the events even once. You know, I'm on stage with Arnold Schwarzenegger interviewing him and hanging out with him, and I haven't looked at it once. And I saw that you had the same thing, that you kind of, in the heat of the moment, you weren't watching your greatest moments and reflecting on them. Has that changed? Is there a moment in my future where I'm finally going to be able to sit back and go, man, I had a good crack at that? You know, has that changed since that comment from you?
Yeah, and I still to this day haven't watched either of the grand finals that West Coast played in, even though, you know, particularly the winning one was incredibly special.
They were iconic
to me. Yeah. But I think I've gotten better at enjoying moments or situations when they arise, particularly if throughout the first 8 to 10 years of my footy career, everything was just about what was coming next. There was, I found that whole time really satisfying as an athlete, but not overly fun. And it wasn't until the very end of my career that I looked back on it and thought, I haven't as much fun as what I essentially should have throughout my footy career. But I'm still not sure if success in a business sense or in a sporting sense, I'm not sure if it benefits from that reflection as you're going. I think they do conflict a little bit. We once had Luke Longley in at...
the legendary basketball, the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah, so he played with Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and some of the greatest basketballers of all time. Yeah. And he got asked what were the common trait that all these basketballers had in common. He said, to be honest, the most common trait they had was that the rest of their lives had huge issues in them because they put so much into their basketball career. Wow. And it's an unpleasant answer to hear because, essentially you want to be hugely successful in whichever pursuit you tackle, but then for there to be no other cost in the rest of your life. And I think the reality is there always is going to be a cost somewhere along the line. If you put so much into one area of your life, there's going to be some cost somewhere else. And as long as you're aware of what that is, as long as you're clear on what you're prepared to give up elsewhere, and realise that it's not necessarily forever. there's some of the decisions you weigh up. And I look back in my 20s, which were, so privileged to be able to play footy, which was a childhood dream. There were a huge number of other experiences I missed out on doing because of that. But I'd do that all over again in a second.
Yeah, wow. Actually, that brings up a point, and let's go into this a bit more at the event there, because there's a real movement in real estate, and it's probably a valid one. I happen to not buy into it, probably just because, as you say, I'm so all in that I see these sorts of comments through my filter. But it is around the work-life balance thing, that there's these people that would dearly love to be $1 million performer, like the top of our industry, doing 7 figures plus, and yet they're unwilling to do the 4 a.m. starts. Yeah. They're unwilling to do the midnight finishes. And so there's this debate about work-life balance versus all in.
Yeah.
And I think we've kind of touched on that a little bit there, that the cost in all of those Luke Longley's colleagues, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Rodman, and all of that, there was a cost to pay.
Yeah, I think it's right. I mean, the work-life balance is great. But I think it often lends to people who are mid-range in that their chosen profession, and there's nothing wrong with being mid-range. That's fine. In my experience, the people that really excel are the people that put the most in and are prepared to do things that the people they're competing with aren't.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty simple formula, but if you're working harder and smarter than your competition, you get further out in front.
Yeah.
I guess it's just being aware of what the potential costs are and how much you're prepared to pay in other aspects of your life, so that you don't tip over the edge into too much imbalance where things can start to get a bit challenging.
Yeah, it's another, I reflect on Michael Jordan, that often he was the first to come, last to leave, and many would argue he was the one who needed to be at training least, and he was first to come, last to leave, so he's all in.
I think people keep looking for these magic answers. Yeah. It's like the pill that makes you shredded and lose weight without having to exercise.
I'm buying, bro. If you got it, is it here?
Everyone's always sort of looking for this magic panacea, but it's the answers are really simple. It's just hard to execute.
Yeah.
I mean, Warren Buffett studied with Benjamin Graham, as did hundreds of other people. He was just able to execute those lessons better than his competitors, and it's essentially the same in sport, the same in business. If you work harder, but also go about working smarter and getting more data and better information than your peers as well, then over time the success comes.
Nice, mate. What can we look forward to at when we unleash the Judd beast on the real estate industry? What can we look forward to?
So looking forward to talking about really the formula I followed as a young player and what worked for me, which when you speak to other people in different industries are pretty common traits that have worked for them, but also just drawing a parallel with how that sits with me now, and understanding that your views or ambition at one phase of your life doesn't have to be the same for the entire phase of your life, and those things can be malleable as you grow and change over time as well. Nice, mate. Oh man, I'm looking forward to it, bud. I can't wait to see your take. Hey, before we let you get back to your world, if that lens there, right? Yes. Was someone who was considering coming to hang out with us for a day. Where we've got some of the guys that are earning the $1 million plus are going to be sharing everything they know. So and someone's sitting on the fence there, and he's right there behind that lens, and he's wanting more, and he's sitting there thinking, I don't think I'll go see that Judd dude, that Twiddle guy, that Glenn Twiddle's an idiot, I don't want to go. What would you say to our mate there, looking right there? You can't afford not to be there. It's going to be a good day. Nice, man. All right, guys, so Mal, Emery and Naomi, that one's for you. It's been my honour, mate. I tell you, it's been such a... not a surprise, because your reputation goes before you, but it's great to have had that reputation confirmed, that you were and are a thinking man. You're a thinking man's player. Now you're a thinking man in business, and I'm loving seeing you go from success to success, even with the playing days are over. Mate, I can't wait to see your next endeavours, and I'm so glad you're coming to hang out with us, mate. Much appreciated. Thanks, mate. Looking forward to it. All right, guys, and on that note, another Total Success interview in the can. Until we see you next time, guys, make sure you're at that Total Success road trip, and until then, guys, bye.